Welcome to Fjordhammer Minisode 5D. In this minisode, you'll be hearing me talk with Rosa about furthering inclusiveness in the miniatures gaming hobby. It's a quite difficult subject, but I think we've tackled it quite well. You'll also heard the start of Long Distance of Murder from the F-Zero X Guitar Arrange album. And going out this episode, you'll be hearing Decide in the Eyes, two rock covers of a video game soundtrack. So I hope you guys enjoy. With me today, I have Rosa, and we're going to talk a bit about how to be more inclusive in the miniatures game hobby. Welcome, Rosa.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So, before we get on to the topic at hand, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Like, how did you get into the hobby? How long have you been playing, and what do you play?
So, first off, I'm from Iceland, but moved to Norway, and I've been active in war games since about 2008 when I joined. I started playing Warhammer Fantasy because some World of Warcraft guys were playing it. That's the kind of intro I got into war games. Before that, I was active I was actively playing role-playing games since I was in high school, and I've been playing board games since forever, to the point of making up rules when we had played the same Matador too often. But as an active in gaming communities, it's been, how old am I? Oh, probably about 15 years in role-playing games and 10 in war games. And currently, I still have my precious orcs and goblins from Warhammer Fantasy, and I'm using them in home games or Kings of War. And then I'm playing War Machine Hordes, a circle player. Yay! It's always Christmas for us. And yes, yeah, it's always Christmas for Circle.
Yeah, it's like playing Space Marines in 40k. You always get new toys.
Yeah, exactly. And then I also have a part of an Infinity army that I share with my husband. I have Malifaux, Frostgrave, Saga, and yeah, we kind of play all the games sometimes.
Yeah, awesome. So the reason I wanted to have you on is if we're going to talk a bit about being more inclusive in the hobby, I wanted to have a second opinion or someone that wasn't just me, because obviously the biggest group of people who aren't in the wargaming hobby at the moment or aren't as involved in the hobby are women. I mean,
yeah. So at least they're not very visible when they are involved.
Yeah, and I think that's very unfortunate. And I wanted to just have this chat and find out ways that everyone can make the hobby more inclusive, not just for women, but for everyone.
Yeah, because I mean, while being a woman in the wargaming often feels like you're in a minority, there's other people that feel the same. But I can only speak, of course, for being the female version, being the minority. But yeah, it would be very good for the hobby just to be inclusive in general, because more inclusive we are, the more players we have, and the more games we have.
Absolutely, and the more great hobby we'll see, and the more, the better the group will be, the more people we can get into it, and the friendlier the groups are.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's been something that I've cared about quite a lot. How basically groups treat newbies, not just female newbies, but newbies in general. So, back when I was showing up at video game LAN nights or role-playing nights and now wargaming, that it's something that I tend to notice. How people treat newbies, and of course, if there are people who treat women differently, I will tend to notice that as well. And sometimes people will say like, oh, but everyone gets treated differently. We treat all the same. But I have the fortunate, if you could call it that, chance of always comparing myself to how people treat my husband. Because when we come new into a group, we're both coming as new people. You don't know anything about us except what you see at face value. And that's when I tend to see how differently we get treated, which is something we can fix by being a bit more open-minded and inclusive in what kind of people actually like to play our hobby.
Absolutely. It's more about being aware of how we treat people rather than saying, I mean, I'm not trying to imply that wargaming isn't inclusive already, but just by us as individuals and as a group being a bit more aware of how we treat new people and how we treat anyone, we can
Yeah.
make the hobby much easier and much friendlier to get into, especially for people who are already maybe a bit skeptical about playing with small plastic soldiers.
Yeah, or in some cases already skeptical about walking into a room full of, now talking as a girl, walking into a room full of like 20, 30 guys. And they're all really into their hobby, which is great. And you feel very, like, different already because you're a newbie and you don't know anyone. And then if anyone starts commenting, making gendered comments like, who are you looking for? Instead of, are you here to play games? Or, oh, you're a girl. Like, or, I mean, obviously everyone knows they shouldn't say that, but there are other ways to say it without saying that literally, kind of way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's very easy, I think, to go to just like, oh, you're a girl. We don't have any girls in our group at the moment, or oh, that's unusual. But
Yeah. And it's probably very natural. I mean, you tend to say, you tend to mention what is different or what is surprising you. But this, for someone at least like me, this tells me there are no girls there. I'm going to be treated differently because they notice that I'm different. Do I really want to go through that?
exactly, and the part of the point is you don't want to be treated differently just because you're a girl or just because you're new.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we should be welcoming to newbies and like, hey, welcome. Are you interested in a hobby? What do you play? And most people that I know try to be extra nice, and that's really good. It's just that you don't want to treat the guy that walks in the door differently from the girl that walks in the door. In that you shouldn't make her feel like, because then there's also the obligation to be the special snowflake for some people.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to fall into sort of that mindset. So let's use an example here, so just to give people some concrete sort of concrete thing to work out of. Let's say you're at an event, or you're going to participate at an event.
Yeah.
You haven't been in the group before. Maybe you've traveled to a different city to be in a tournament or something.
Yeah.
And then you walk in the door, and then you go up to the organizers. What sort of experiences would you like to have in that situation? Just like on that basic, like completely new into a scene experience.
Talking personally, I would like, and what I try to treat newbies in that situation, having been a role-playing organizing a role-playing tournament, I try to treat the new people that way is, oh, there's a new person, welcome, have you been here before, do you know anyone, what are you playing, what are you planning to play, not, are you looking for someone, do you want me to help your boyfriend? Looking at you awkwardly and not even saying anything.
Yeah, please don't do that.
Yeah, like, but just, hello, welcome, what are you planning to play? and of course the normal, like what you would want to greet a player with. I think that's really the point, that don't treat the person based on how they look. Treat them as if, just assume that anyone that comes through the door is there to play. If the person is actually looking for their partner or the toilet or whatever, then of course that person will correct you and say, oh, well, actually, I'm not here to play. I am looking for someone. And that's a much more natural conversation.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good point, and I think we'll come back to that in a little bit. Because I can come with an example of my own, not from like an event, but as a person who's worked in a store that sells these sorts of things. I notice there's a lot of women who come in to buy miniatures for their boyfriends.
Yeah.
And I notice when my other coworkers who don't really know anything about Warhammer sort of approach them to help them, it's with the default expression of, oh, who are you buying this for? Or do you know what you're looking for? Instead of, can I help you find something?
Yeah, that is a perfect thing to turn a person away from a hobby or a store. It's happened quite often to me and several of my friends that we will go to a store with our boyfriends or friends or husbands, and even if it's us that's going to buy stuff, the attention is to our male friends first.
Yeah, because there's an assumption there that you're not there for the hobby aspect. You're there because your husband or because your boyfriend
is dragging you to this horrible place that sells shiny things. No, yeah, it is something that people who are selling products really should be more aware of. They are really limiting their customer base by half. Because yes, not everyone is going to like wargaming, of course. But if you only focus on, okay, I'm gonna sell to just this type of person, you're ignoring everyone else that might buy it or play with it with you in case of players. So
exactly. So we talked a bit about how, going into the event, then you get paired up. You're going to play someone, and I would assume that you would occasionally be treated a bit differently when playing as well, either in the way the person talks to you or plays against you. Have you ever noticed things like that, or is it things on the tabletop that you feel people need to be a bit more aware of when they're dealing with anyone, really?
Yeah, it really is about dealing with anyone, because okay, if you're at a competitive tournament, then be competitive as if you were playing anyone. Play the game that you want to play. Don't, oh, I'm playing against someone that doesn't fit my idea of a regular player. I'll wear silk gloves and be really nice. Don't start to treat them differently unless the person has asked you, or if you ask, like, oh, do you have a lot of experience, which is a bit of a red flag, unless you ask everyone, because if you ask the girl in the room, oh, how long have you played, when you haven't asked any of your other opponents, yeah, that's not really nice either.
Yeah, I think
don't give special treatment, basically, unless the person asks you, and then only up to the point that you are willing. If it is a competitive tournament, then of course, why would you lose intentionally? But if it's relaxed, we're here for the storytelling tournament, then yeah.
Yeah, I think what we can sort of take out is a bit, treat everyone, like, don't assume too much about the person you're meeting, whether it's, no matter who it is. Let the other person establish how skilled they are, or what they're here for. It's like as we said, don't ask, do you know what you're buying? Or, uh,
Yeah,
oh, are you here to play in the tournament? It's better to ask, what do you play? And then let the other person say, oh, I play this army, or or I'm not here to play, I'm here for another reason.
yeah, exactly. And it's easy to say also, especially like when you're playing, don't be a dick. But I have noticed it's a tendency with, I don't like the word mansplaining, but sometimes you kind of have to use it under certain circumstances because of this assumption that, oh, I'm a guy, I've played this for longer than you, and therefore I'm going to explain how your army works. Even though you don't, even though the person who's about to do the explaining doesn't realize that, oh, well, I've played my army for 5 years, I know how it works, but this is how I choose to play it. Thankfully, I've only had this happen to me once, and it was a 14-year-old guy, and I was kind of too amused, and also I was at the tournament just to socialize and not really win, so I just let him. I was like, oh, so suddenly the Wood Elves can like do twice a turn. Sure, go for it. But because the assumption from him was that, oh, I'm a girl, I would probably not notice that he was abusing the rules.
Yeah, I think a lot of these things are pretty universal, and I think it sort of sounds very negative. I think we sound quite negative now because we're pointing out a lot of things that people should be a bit more aware of, and things that flaws that parts of
And
the
we,
community have, or that one person might do one thing wrong but everything else right. But I, our intention here isn't really to be negative. It's just to, like, here's small things for you to be a little bit more aware of when you meet someone, like when you meet someone new in the community or in your local community.
yeah, it's difficult to try to keep away from the negative, but it's definitely more important to focus on the positive about what you can do as a positive. And it's also what you can do, even if you're not the person who's doing the negative things. If you notice someone else doing it, call them out. Tell them either out loud in front of everyone, which might put you in the spot, but it will help the person who might feel awkward because of it. Like, if someone is talking to me like I don't belong there, then someone else telling them cut it out will make me feel more comfortable about being there. But if you don't want to do that, like in front of everyone, you don't want to embarrass your friend because what he said really wasn't that bad, but it was kind of like not quite the right thing to do, then just talk to them in private, like, don't do that again. And if I am allowed to use an example, using you as an example?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably be the best thing to use an example here.
Well, no, you've been very good. But you did, we had this discussion a while ago in the Facebook group that someone was going to bring their, I can't remember, friend or wife or something. And you made the comment, yes, we'll treat her like a lady. And this is a sort of really innocent, you don't mean anything by it, but it also points out we're going to treat her differently because she's a C. And that's like different. And I think it was Chris that pointed out, well, how about saying we'll treat her like a person or something like that. So I think that's an example of, it's a very small thing, but it does, those small things pile up. And pointing out in public, but still, like, I think he did it fairly politely and tried to make a joke out of it. I can't remember the exact conversation. But, and pointing it out also sends the message that whoever random person is reading it, no, we are not going to treat the person differently by gender, even if that was said. And I think you responded fairly well with him to his comment as well.
Yeah, it's comments like that that sort of had led me to have this discussion because on my end, when I was making that, this was just like a completely innocent comment that I had no concept that this might be received differently for other people. For me, it's just when I said, "Oh, I'll treat her like a lady," uh, I didn't personally like imply anything. I didn't feel like I implied that I'd treat her differently, but obviously, that is, in a quite literal sense, what it is. That you will treat her like a woman in a group that is otherwise made up mostly of men, and you will therefore treat her somehow differently.
Yeah, and of course, anyone who knows you knows that you don't really mean that in a negative way, and most people will scroll by this comment. But if there are many such small things, not to mention bigger things that we like, or obviously not what people polite people do, then these things pile up, and they have an effect of like when they're all put together, like a background sound that gets really noisy the longer it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing that as a community it's not very difficult to be just a little bit better, but for every small thing that we do a little bit better, it gets easier for new people to come in, regardless of who they are, because of that sort of background noise of annoying or mildly offensive or just differentiating comments.
Mm.
Uh, as long as the noise of that just lessens, it becomes easier to feel like part of the group and feel like you're welcome in the group.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's not that I in any way would ever want to dictate what people say in their private groups. It's just, again, if it's in a public forum, if it's in a club or a tournament where a lot of people gather, not everyone knows you, not everyone feels like you are their friends and stuff like that. So we want to be aware that it's not just the person you're talking to, it's just the person you're writing to that reads it or hears it.
Yeah, if you have like a private Facebook group with you and your four friends, or you're gaming at home uh, in your own living room,
Yeah,
that's one thing. But if you're in a public club or at an event or working in a store or posting on Facebook groups that are open, just be a bit mindful of how you phrase yourself and what sort of things and how you comment on things.
because you asked me for examples and stuff, I had a short discussion with my youngest sister before we talked. Asked her for like suggestions of what to talk about, and we did come up with three things that are quite like seem to be a natural way that some people behave, which they might not necessarily realize that they're doing, but can be very off-putting to newbies, especially people who are new to the hobby specifically. Like, if I would be inviting a friend of mine that I know she reads fantasy novels, I know she loves Lord of the Rings and stuff, and I know she would love to play the Lord of the Rings miniature game. But if I bring her to a club and I know someone will start quizzing her on her knowledge, like the test, even if you think you're making conversation, if you're really like trying to see where the person, do you know what happened in the Silmarillion, or do you know the backstory of Space Marines, and do you know what the orcs, how they reproduce in 40k? If that's among the first questions, I mean, those are questions that come up naturally in a geeky conversation. But if that's one of the first questions you have for a person, it doesn't feel like a conversation. It feels like gatekeeping.
Yeah, it feels like that the other person's testing you to see if you're worthy to be part of the group.
Yeah. So, I mean, instead of asking those kind of like, oh, what, like we said before, what game do you play and so on, and it's like, oh, I'm interested in the orc. Oh, yeah, they're really cool. What do you like best about them? And oh, have you seen this novel or read this lore? And then you can offer to tell them about it, or you find out they actually know way more than you, and that's fine.
We shouldn't limit ourselves to sort of that you have to get over some minimum level to be accepted as a nerd in this hobby. It's enough that you've watched Lord of the Rings and thought that was cool and want to play the game.
And that is how you treat any new person to the group. That is like, do you really want to greet a person like that? But some people like feel this need of establishing, I don't know, a hierarchy of who knows more.
That one's really easy to get into because as someone who's very passionate about your hobby, you want to know where the other person is and what they know. But there are more elegant ways of doing that. As you mentioned, like ask them what they think is cool about it, and then mention other things that you think are cool. And then, then you have a conversation instead of a sort of one-sided inquisition.
Yeah. That's, I think, one of the things that we can do for when people, like, hey, I want to play and stuff, get into, to make them more part of the group.
Now that you sort of mention it, I think that's one thing that I could probably be a bit better at. I probably ask a lot of questions like that when I work at the store.
Yeah, okay.
Not like inquisiting people on it, but like asking them, instead of asking them, what do you think is cool, is more, I feel now that maybe I myself actually ask a bit much like, oh, what do you know about the universe? Or what do you...
Yeah. That's the kind of attitude that can be very off-putting to any new person.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said you had two more examples?
It's very similar in that there is also the tendency for nerds of any gender to start like mine is bigger than yours conversations, and I am very guilty of this. Like, I have about 5,000 points worth of wood elves, and like half of it is painted. And then you go, well, I have 8,000 of space marines. Well, I have 10,000 of orcs. Now, if I then the third person sits there like, I have 500 points of Bretonians. Do I even count in this conversation?
Yeah, I can see that can be very off-putting.
Or I've been playing Warhammer since I was 13-year-old with my dad, and sort of like dismissing the opinions of others that have only been playing it for like since the 8th edition.
Yeah, dismissing someone because, oh, you only got in on this edition. I remember the good old days.
Oh, the good old days. That's
That's a different topic.
Yeah.
Don't think we should get in on that, but
and these kind of conversations are really, I mean, I witnessed those equally between regardless of gender. I mean, like I say, I've started these kind of conversations relating to sysadmin stuff, computer stuff, so I'm guilty of it as well. It's sort of a natural way to try to establish hierarchy, with an unofficial hierarchy, I guess. But it's something that we really should avoid doing towards people that just came in.
It's fun to sort of compare army sizes and all that, but if you start that with someone who doesn't really have much, it's like, oh, I got this for Christmas and I bought one extra unit, that's all I have. And then you come and say, oh, well, I've been collecting for 20 years and I have 10 armies that are 100 times bigger than yours. It's like, yeah. It sort of invalidates their interest in the hobby because they feel that they haven't invested as much in it as you have, and that their investment becomes less just because someone else has more.
Yeah. And I mean, it's, even if you don't think you say it like this, it almost always sounds like that. kind of thing.
Yeah, and
For a new person, for a person who just comes into the group. It really just sounds like that.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's very easy to be a bit aware of. Like, it's fine to say, ugh, I have way too much stuff, but don't turn that into having more stuff is better because having more stuff is better.
Mm. The third thing was, that's really just a of course thing, but it's gendered comments and gendered insults. Not necessarily even directed at the person of that gender. And this, of course, applies to racial comments and more range of it. But to take something that sounds really innocent, AIDS before beauty or beauty before AIDS, kind of thing. Or ladies first. When you start up a game, and you go, oh, let's roll. Oh, you go first, ladies first. You're trying to be a gentleman, but you're just pointing out that I don't have certain equipment that you have.
So they're giving you first turn because you're a woman?
Someone will say that sometimes, like, just, it's meant as a joke, but all the small things. And if there would be a girl that just walked in the door and heard that, even if it's just a light joke between friends, she would immediately hear, oh, so you do treat girls differently. Some don't mind, of course. That is one thing. We are all different, and some people like to be treated special. They like the attention, or they don't notice the attention. They don't notice the differences. It's all normal for them, and that's fine. But there are people who do mind that you are actively pushing away by making a difference between them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So we're running a bit out on time here.
Yeah.
But do you have any sort of closing comments, anything that you just like to say or mention or anything like that?
Well, basically for this topic at hand, it's to be more inclusive means it's not just don't be a dick. It's more also be actively welcoming and inclusive. Make efforts to make other people feel welcome. Make efforts to say things and ask them things that will make them feel welcome and safe. Both in terms of how you behave and how you react to other people, how other people behave. So, yeah, that would be my summarize of our chat, really.
Yeah, it's not about the negative don't be, but rather the positive be inclusive, be friendly, be the person who everyone wants to play against, regardless of who they are.
Yeah. Be the person that people will trust that, of course, be that person, and also when you are that person, when you're the inclusive, the friendly, the fun to play against, regardless of who you are, you know the person treats everyone differently. You will also become the person that someone can turn to if they feel like something is wrong.
Absolutely, and that sort of stuff is quite important.
There's a lot of things that go wrong in human interactions is something that can't be solved by a third person talking, like being the middle person and solving things. So being that person means that there are more people around that other people can feel comfortable around and talk to.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for your time and for helping me out with this kind of difficult topic. If people would like to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Check that out. It's Rosberg. Or, as I recently had to tell a Norwegian person, it's pink dog with an extra G. Yeah.
Yeah. That's not a joke anyone in the UK or the US are going to understand, but
No,
it's
well,
funny for us Scandinavians.
yeah. But yeah, it's just my first name, Rosa Duck, on Twitter. And they probably can find me on your people who are following you list.
Yeah, definitely. All right, thank you so much, and talk to you maybe some other time. Let's see if we get some comments on this, and maybe people have some ideas and some reactions. I'm expecting something at least.
Well, I hope it'll be very positive.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll talk to you maybe later online, but at least at the club next time I'm there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's it for this mini-sode. Join me next week when the next mini-sode comes out, or if you'd like to get the full episode, it's available right now. If you want to contact me, check out my Facebook at Fjordhammer. You can contact the podcast on Twitter at Fjordhammer, or you can contact me directly on Twitter at Darth_Alec. Or if you prefer to send emails, you can send them to fjordhammerpodcast@gmail.com. So until next time, ha det bra!